The small dining room in my modest two-bedroom house had never felt so crowded. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this dinner, my arthritic hands chopping, stirring, and seasoning despite the pain that shot through my joints with each movement. But it was worth it. My daughter Emily was visiting with her husband Richard and their two children, my precious grandchildren, whom I rarely got to see anymore. It had been 8 months since their last visit, though they lived just 40 minutes away in their sprawling suburban home with the in-ground pool and three-car garage. Mom, we're just so busy, Emily would say during our brief weekly phone calls. The kids have soccer and piano and Richard's always working late. I understood, or at least I pretended to. What else could I do? Demand they visit an old woman whose company they clearly didn't prioritize? I'd been a widow for 6 years now. After Gerald's passing, the house felt too empty, too quiet. The silence would sometimes become so oppressive that I'd turn on the TV just to hear human voices. My son Michael lived in Seattle with his family, and I saw them maybe once a year at Christmas. He called more often than Emily did, though, and always sent photos of my grandchildren there. My dining table was nothing fancy, oak, sturdy, bought at a garage sale 15 years ago, when Gerald and I downsized. I'd covered it with my best tablecloth, the one with delicate embroidered flowers that my mother had given me as a wedding present nearly 50 years ago. The china plates were from the same era, showing small chips and faded patterns that told the story of countless family meals. I'd set everything up perfectly, my grandmother's silver candlesticks polished to a mirror shine, cloth napkins folded into fans, and a small bouquet of flowers from my garden as a centerpiece. The roast had been cooking for hours, filling the house with a rich aroma that reminded me of Sundays when my children were young and everyone gathered around this very table, laughing and sharing stories. "Grandma, do you have Wi-Fi?" 10-year-old Zachary asked immediately after entering, his eyes never leaving his tablet screen. "No, sweetheart, I don't. But I thought we could play some board games after dinner. I still have your mom's old Monopoly set in the closet." He rolled his eyes. "That's so boring." Emily swept in, wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her hair was highlighted in a way that must have cost hundreds, and her nails were perfectly manicured. Richard followed, already checking his watch as if counting down the minutes until they could leave. "Mom, the place looks nice," Emily said, her eyes scanning the living room with a barely concealed grimace at the dated furniture and faded wallpaper. "We can't stay too long, though. Zachary has a playdate tomorrow morning, and we need to get back." They had just arrived, and she was already planning their departure. I swallowed my disappointment and smiled. "Of course, dear. I'm just happy you're here now." Little Madison, just 7, was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me. She ran into my arms, her small body colliding with mine in a fierce hug that nearly knocked me off balance. "Grandma, I lost another tooth, see?" She opened her mouth wide to show me the gap where her front tooth had been. "My goodness. Did the tooth fairy come?" She gave me $5. Madison beamed. $5 for a tooth. In my day, children got a quarter, maybe 50 cents, but I kept that thought to myself. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Richard asked about the neighborhood, though his eyes kept darting to his phone under the table. Emily talked about her job at the marketing firm where she'd recently been promoted. The grandchildren fidgeted in their seats, Zachary continuing to play his game with the sound muted while Madison at least attempted to eat her dinner, though she mostly pushed the vegetables around her plate. "So, Mom, have you thought any more about that senior living community I told you about?" Emily asked, casually cutting her meat into precise little squares. "The one with the activities and the nursing staff on site." This wasn't the first time she'd brought it up. Each visit included some mention of selling my house, moving to a facility, making things easier for everyone. "I'm quite happy here, Emily. I can still take care of myself. But for how long?" She gestured around the room. "This place is falling apart. That water stain on the ceiling is worse than last time. And you had that fall in February. It was just a little slip on some ice. I was fine this time. But what about next time?" Richard chimed in, suddenly interested in the conversation. Property values in this area are actually quite good right now. You could sell for a nice amount and use that to fund a comfortable retirement situation. I noticed how they said retirement situation instead of what it really was, a nursing home. A place to store me away so they wouldn't have to worry, wouldn't have to visit this house that embarrassed them with its outdated decor and humble appearance. Let's not talk about this now, I said softly, rising to check on the side dishes warming in the oven. The food is getting cold. That's the problem, Mom. You never want to talk about it, Emily said, her voice taking on that condescending tone she'd perfected sometime in her 30s. We're just thinking about what's best for you, what's best for me, or what's most convenient for you. I wanted to ask, but instead I busied myself in the kitchen, blinking back tears as I removed the roasted potatoes and green bean casserole from the oven. My hands trembled slightly as I spooned the food into serving bowls. Need help in there? Richard called out, though he made no move to actually get up. No, thank you, I've got it. I returned to the table with the dishes, setting them down carefully before taking my seat again. Emily wrinkled her nose slightly as she took a small portion of potatoes. Are these instant? No, I peeled and cut them myself this morning. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Richard took a bite of the roast and frowned. It's a bit tough, isn't it, and cold? I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. I'm sorry, I had it warming, but maybe it cooled while I was setting everything else up. Madison had started eating happily, not seeming to notice or care about the temperature of the food. Zachary hadn't even touched his plate, too engrossed in whatever game had captured his attention. Zachary, please put that away and eat your dinner, Emily said sharply. Grandma went to a lot of trouble. But it's cold, he whined, mimicking his father's complaint without having tried a single bite. I can warm it up in the microwave, I offered, half rising from my chair. Sit down. Mom, it's fine, Emily sighed dramatically. We'll manage. The conversation limped along after that. I asked about their recent vacation to Florida, and they showed me a few photos on Richard's phone. I told them about my garden club and the new library volunteer program I'd joined. They nodded politely, their expressions making it clear these activities seemed quaint and inconsequential to them. Remember how Dad used to say grace before every meal? I said, trying to evoke some warmer family memories. He'd always thank God specifically for the hands that prepared the food. Dad was from a different generation, Emily replied dismissively. Things were simpler then, simpler, yes. Perhaps they were, simpler when my children still respected me, simpler when family dinners weren't endurance tests of criticism and condescension. I noticed Richard checking his watch again. They'd been here less than an hour, and he was already counting down to departure. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the one that came whenever I realized how little my presence meant in their busy lives. I made your favorite dessert, Emily. Apple pie with cinnamon ice cream. Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have. We're all watching our sugar intake. Richard's pre-diabetic, and the kids have already had their treat allowance for the week. The pie, I'd spent hours on that morning peeling apples despite the arthritis that made my fingers feel like they were on fire, carefully weaving the lattice top just the way Emily had loved as a girl would go uneaten. Like my love, rejected as unnecessary, unwanted. Maybe just a small piece? I suggested. For old time's sake, Emily's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, clearly relieved for the distraction. Oh, it's work. I should take this. She stood up and walked into the living room, her voice immediately taking on that artificial professional tone she never used with family. Richard excused himself to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with the children. Madison was still eating, taking small, careful bites of her roast. Zachary had returned to his game, the food on his plate untouched. Zachary, please eat something, I said gently. Growing boys need their strength. I'm not hungry, and it's cold. He didn't look up from his screen. Would you like me to heat it up for you? No, I don't want it. I bit my lip, unsure how to respond to this level of rudeness from my own grandson. In my day, children ate what was put in front of them and said thank you, regardless of whether it was their favorite meal or not. Richard returned, his hair slightly damp at the temples as if he'd splashed water on his face. He sat back down heavily and immediately checked his phone again. "How's your work going, Richard?" I asked, trying once more to engage him. "Fine. Busy. The usual." He didn't elaborate or look up. Emily returned from her call, her expression pinched. "Mom, do you have any antacids?" Richard's stomach is acting up again. "Yes, in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom." I already looked. Couldn't find any. I rose from my chair. "I'll get them for you." As I walked to the bathroom, I could hear Emily's lowered voice. "I told you we should have just gotten takeout somewhere. Her cooking always upsets your stomach." The words struck me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand clutching the doorframe for support. Had my cooking really been making Richard sick all these years? Why had no one ever told me? I found the antacids and returned to the dining room, my movements mechanical now, my thoughts elsewhere. I handed the bottle to Richard without meeting his eyes. "Thanks, Margaret," he said, using my first name as he always did, though I'd asked him repeatedly over the years to call me Mom or even Maggie. I sat back down at the table and looked at the scene before me. My daughter and her husband checking their phones, my grandson playing his game, only Madison actually eating the meal I'd prepared with such care and love. Something inside me deflated. A slow leak of hope that had been sustaining me for months in anticipation of this visit. "Mom, this roast is really cold now," Emily said suddenly, pushing her plate away. "Don't you have a warming drawer or something?" "No, dear. But I can heat it in the microwave for you." "Don't bother. We should probably get going soon anyway." She glanced at Richard, who nodded eagerly. "But you've only been here an hour," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "I thought we might play a game or look at some old photos after dinner. I found an album with pictures from your high school graduation." Emily rolled her eyes, the exact same expression Zachary had given me earlier. "Mom, we told you we have a busy day tomorrow. And honestly, I'm not really in the mood to eat cold food." I said I could warm it up. "That's not the point." Her voice rose sharply, startling Madison, who dropped her fork with a clatter. "The point is that you should have made sure it was hot before serving it. It's basic hospitality." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "I'm sorry the food isn't to your liking, Emily. I did my best." "Your best clearly isn't what it used to be," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. The comment stung more than it should have. I knew I was slower than before. My hands didn't work as well, my energy flagged earlier in the day. But I had started preparing this meal at 6 in the morning, determined to make everything perfect for their visit. "Perhaps we could at least have some coffee and talk a bit before you go?" I suggested, hating how pleading my voice sounded. Emily sighed dramatically. "Fine. Coffee. But then we really need to head out." I stood to clear the plates, my movements stiff with tension and the ever-present arthritis. "Let me help you, Grandma," Madison offered, standing up beside me. "Thank you, sweetheart." "That's very kind." We gathered the dishes together, my granddaughter carefully stacking plates as I'd shown her during previous visits. As we moved to the kitchen, I heard Richard say to Emily, "Text me when it's been 15 minutes so I can fake a work emergency." My hands trembled as I set the dishes in the sink. Madison looked up at me with concerned eyes. "Are you okay, Grandma? Your face looks sad." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired. I liked the dinner. It was yummy." I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you, Madison. That means a lot to me." When we returned to the dining room, Emily was showing Zachary something on her phone, both of them laughing. They didn't look up as we entered. "I'll make coffee," I said, though no one acknowledged me. In the kitchen, I went through the motions of measuring grounds and filling the coffee maker with water. My mind felt strangely detached, as if I were watching myself from a distance. All the hurt and disappointment of the evening of the past several years really had crystallized into something hard and sharp inside my chest. I returned with the tray of coffee cups, cream, and sugar. Emily was now openly discussing with Richard how they needed to handle the mom situation before the holidays. "We can't keep coming here. The house is depressing, and the food is inedible," she was saying as I walked in, maybe we should just invite her to our place next time, where we can control the environment better. I set the tray down with more force than intended, causing the cups to rattle. The coffee will be ready in a few minutes. Emily at least had the decency to look embarrassed at being overheard, though she quickly masked it with irritation. Mom, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that. I wasn't sneaking. This is my dining room. An uncomfortable silence fell. Richard suddenly became very interested in straightening his silverware. Zachary didn't even notice the tension, still absorbed in his game. Only Madison seemed aware, her eyes darting nervously between her mother and me. The coffee maker beeped, and I returned to the kitchen to fetch the pot. As I poured the steaming liquid into cups, I could feel something building inside me, not just hurt now, but anger, a slow burning, righteous anger that had been suppressed for too long. I carried the coffee pot to the table and filled each cup methodically. No one thanked me. So, Mom, Emily began, her tone artificially bright, about that senior living facility. I'm not moving, I said firmly, setting the coffee pot down on the table. This is my home. Your father and I paid off this mortgage 20 years ago. We raised you and Michael in this house. Every corner holds memories that I cherish. Emily exchanged a look with Richard. That's exactly the problem. You're living in the past, clinging to a house that's too big for you, that you can't properly maintain anymore. I maintain it just fine, really. What about the leaky faucet in the bathroom, the torn screen on the back porch, the peeling paint on the shutters? This place is falling apart around you, and you're too stubborn to admit it. Each criticism felt like a slap. Yes, there were repairs needed. On my fixed income, I had to prioritize. The property taxes alone ate up a significant portion of my monthly budget. But this was my home, my sanctuary. I've been meaning to fix those things, I said weakly. When? You've been saying that for years now. Emily stirred her coffee aggressively, the spoon clinking against the cup. Look, we're just worried about you. Living alone at your age isn't safe. My age, I'm 72, not 92. Plenty of people my age live independently. Plenty of people your age fall and break their hips and lie on the floor for days before anyone finds them, Richard interjected. I have Life Alert, I reminded them, touching the button I wore around my neck. And I have friends who check on me. Marge from next door brings me muffins every Sunday. Tom across the street shovels my walk in the winter. That's nice, Mom, but it's not the same as having professional care available, Emily said dismissively. And what about when you can't drive anymore? This neighborhood isn't walkable. How will you get groceries, get to doctor's appointments? These were questions I'd asked myself in the quiet hours of the night, fears I'd pushed away because the alternative, leaving my home, my independence, seemed worse than any inconvenience. I'll figure it out when the time comes. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to appear more confident than I felt. That's exactly the problem. Emily's voice rose again. You refuse to plan ahead. You wait until there's a crisis, and then everyone else has to scramble to help you. When have I ever made you scramble? I asked, genuinely bewildered. When have I ever asked you for anything? That's not the point. What is the point, Emily? Please explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're eager to shuffle me off somewhere so you don't have to feel guilty about never visiting. Emily's face flushed red. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably and checked his watch again. Madison looked close to tears while Zachary remained oblivious, tapping away at his screen. That's not fair, Emily said, her voice tight. We're busy people. We have demanding jobs, active children. We can't just drop everything to drive out here whenever you want company. Once every 8 months is whenever I want. Once every 8 months is too much to ask from my only daughter who lives 40 minutes away. I could feel my voice trembling with emotion. See, this is exactly why these conversations are impossible, Emily snapped. You always make me feel guilty, like I'm not doing enough. I have my own life, Mom. I can't organize it around your loneliness. The words hung in the air between us, brutal in their honesty. My loneliness? The thing we never discussed directly, the shadow that loomed over every brief phone call and abbreviated visit. I don't expect you to organize your life around me, I said quietly, but is it really too much to ask for a few hours of genuine connection once in a while? Not this. I gestured at the table. At Richard checking his watch, at Zachary on his tablet, at the barely touched food. This performance of family that you rush through like a chore. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked in front of my children. Richard, get the kids' jackets. We're leaving. Emily, please, I said, standing as well. I'm not attacking you. I'm just asking for some basic respect and consideration. Respect? You want to talk about respect? Her voice was rising dangerously now. How about respecting our time by not serving cold, tough meat that nobody wants to eat? How about respecting our concerns about your living situation instead of dismissing them? How about respecting the fact that we drove all the way out here on a Friday night when we could have been anywhere else? Each word hit like a physical blow. I stood there, stunned by the venom in her voice, the barely concealed contempt. I thought anywhere else would include your mother's home once in a while, I said softly. I thought family meant something more than an obligation to be endured. Oh, for God's sake, Emily threw up her hands. Always with the guilt trips. Always with the poor me. My children don't love me enough routine. It's exhausting, Mom. You're exhausting. I felt something crack inside me then, some final thread of restraint. And you're cruel, Emily. When did you become so cruel? I didn't raise you to speak to anyone this way, let alone your own mother. No, you raised me to be a doormat like you were with Dad. To smile and serve and never complain no matter how I'm treated. Well, I refuse to live that way, and I refuse to pretend everything's fine when it's not. What exactly isn't fine about having dinner with your mother? I demanded. What terrible hardship are you enduring right now? Emily gestured at her plate. This food is inedible, Mom. Cold, tough, probably unsanitary given the state of your kitchen. I was trying to be polite, but since you want honesty, the food is fine, Mom, Madison interjected suddenly, her small voice surprisingly firm. Grandma worked really hard on it. Emily whirled on her daughter, stay out of this. Madison, this is between Grandma and me, but you're being mean for no reason, Madison persisted. Her lower lip trembling but her gaze steady. Grandma made us dinner and you're being mean to her. I said stay out of it. Emily snapped, causing Madison to shrink back in her chair. Don't speak to her that way, I said. Anger flaring hot at seeing my granddaughter treated so harshly. She's right, you are being mean. For no reason. Emily looked at me with such naked contempt that I barely recognized her as the little girl I'd raised, the one who used to climb into my lap for comfort. Who made me handprint cards for Mother's Day, who cried when she had to go home after spending weekends with her grandparents. The reason, Mother, is that I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of these obligatory visits that nobody enjoys. I'm tired of your passive-aggressive comments and your martyred sighs and your cold, disgusting food. Before I could respond, she grabbed her plate and thrust it toward me. The movement so sudden and aggressive that I flinched. Here. See for yourself. It's ice cold, probably rancid. God knows how long it sat out while you were fussing with everything else. The plate was inches from my face, the partially eaten roast beef and congealed gravy a sad sight indeed. But it wasn't the food that broke my heart in that moment, it was the realization that my daughter, my own child, had become someone I didn't know, someone who could treat her mother with such disdain. Emily, please put the plate down, I said quietly. You're upsetting the children. I'm upsetting them. You're the one who can't accept reality. You're the one who insists on living in this depressing old house, serving inedible food, and then acting wounded when no one wants to visit, Emily. That's enough, Richard finally interjected. Looking genuinely uncomfortable now, let's just go, no. I want her to understand why we don't come more often. I want her to stop with the guilt trips and the sad eyes and the oh, it's been 8 months comments. This, she gestured around wildly with the plate still in her hand. This is why, Mom. This whole situation is depressing and uncomfortable and the food is disgusting. With that last word, she thrust the plate toward me again, this time with enough force that some of the gravy sloshed over the edge and onto my cream-colored blouse. Emily, Richard exclaimed, half rising from his chair. I looked down at the brown stain spreading across my chest, the blouse I'd carefully selected and ironed for this special occasion now ruined. Something inside me snapped. That's enough, I said, my voice low but firm. Put the plate down and leave my house. Emily blinked, momentarily startled by my tone. Then her face hardened again gladly. Let's go, everyone. Dinner's over. Not everyone, I said, still in that same steady voice I barely recognized as my own. Madison can stay if she wants to. She, at least, knows how to behave like a decent human being. Don't be ridiculous. Madison is coming with us. Emily grabbed her purse from the back of her chair. Zachary, turn that thing off. We're leaving. Zachary looked up, finally registering the tension in the room. What's happening? We're going home. Grandma's not feeling well. Emily's voice dripped with sarcasm. No. Grandma is feeling perfectly fine, I corrected her. Grandma just doesn't want to be disrespected in her own home anymore. Disrespected? You're the one who disrespected us by serving this garbage and expecting us to eat it. And then it happened in one fluid motion. Emily picked up the plate again and flung its contents directly at me. Most of it missed, hitting the wall behind me, but a piece of meat struck my shoulder before sliding down my arm, leaving a greasy trail on my sleeve. The room went deadly silent. Madison's eyes were wide with shock. Zachary had finally put down his tablet. Richard stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. And Emily, my daughter, my firstborn, stood there breathing heavily, her face a mask of anger that was already beginning to crack around the edges as the reality of what she'd done sank in. I didn't speak, I didn't cry, I simply walked to the kitchen. My movements deliberate and controlled. I took a dish towel, dampened it under the faucet, and returned to the dining room, where I began to wipe the gravy from my blouse and arm. Mom, Emily began, her voice suddenly uncertain. I held up one hand, stopping her. No. You don't get to speak right now. I continued cleaning myself methodically, aware of 4 pairs of eyes tracking my every movement. When I'd done the best I could with the stains, I folded the towel neatly and placed it on the table. I want you to leave now, I said, looking directly at Emily. All of you except Madison, if she wishes to stay. Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It was just the stress and, you threw food at me, I interrupted, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. You called my cooking garbage. You've insulted my home, my capabilities, and my worth as a person. And you did it in front of your children, teaching them that this is how you treat your mother when she ages, when she becomes inconvenient. Emily's face crumpled slightly. I didn't mean yes, you did. You meant every word. And that's fine. You're entitled to your feelings. But I'm entitled to mine as well, and right now I feel that I deserve better than this. So please leave. Richard had already started gathering their things, clearly eager to escape the situation. Zachary stood awkwardly by his chair, for once fully present in the moment, his young face confused and a little frightened. Madison approached me slowly, her small hand reaching for mine. I want to stay with Grandma. That's not possible, Emily said quickly. We're all going home together. Why? Madison challenged, surprising everyone with her defiance. You were mean to Grandma. I don't want to go with you. I want to stay here. Emily's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Madison, now is not the time to argue. Get your jacket. No. Madison moved closer to me, gripping my hand tightly. Grandma made a nice dinner and you ruined it. You're being a bully. The word hung in the air between us. Bully. Such a simple word, yet so devastating when applied by a child to her own mother. Emily looked stricken. Madison, please, it's okay, Madison, I said gently, squeezing her hand. You should go with your parents. But thank you for standing up for me. That was very brave. Madison looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. Will I see you again soon? The innocence of the question broke my heart all over again. I hope so, sweetheart. That's up to your mom and dad. We should go, Richard said, his voice uncomfortably loud in the tense room. Emily, kids, let's get our things. As they gathered their jackets from the coat rack in the hallway, I remained standing by the dining table, my hands clasped in front of me. I felt strangely calm now, as if I'd passed through the eye of an emotional hurricane and emerged on the other side, battered but somehow clearer. Emily approached me hesitantly, her jacket already on. "Mom, I really am sorry. I lost my temper." "It won't happen again, you're right about that," I said quietly, "because I won't put myself in this position again. I deserve better, Emily, even from you." Something flickered in her eyes, hurt, perhaps, or the dawning realization of what she'd done, but before she could respond, Richard called from the doorway, "Emily, the kids are in the car, we should go." She hesitated, then leaned in as if to hug me or kiss my cheek. I stepped back, maintaining the distance between us. "Goodbye, Emily." She flinched at the finality in my tone. "Bye, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow when things have calmed down." I didn't respond, simply watched as she walked to the door. Just before exiting, she turned back. "I really am sorry," she said again, her voice smaller now. "I know you think you are," I replied. "But I don't think you understand what you're sorry for yet." And then they were gone. The front door closed with a soft click that seemed to echo through the empty house. I stood in the dining room, surrounded by the ruins of the dinner I'd spent days preparing. The splattered gravy on the wall, the scattered food on the floor, the half-eaten meals congealing on expensive china plates. I moved to the window and watched their car back out of the driveway, headlights cutting through the early evening darkness. As they drove away, I felt something shift inside me, not just hurt or anger, but a profound sense of clarity. For years, I'd accepted the crumbs of their attention, grateful for whatever time they could spare me. I'd made excuses for their neglect, blamed myself for not being interesting enough, active enough, worthy enough of their precious time. I'd swallowed criticism and condescension, telling myself it was just Emily's way, that she didn't mean to be hurtful. But tonight had torn away the veil of denial my daughter had thrown food at me, literally thrown it because it wasn't to her liking. What kind of person does that to anyone, let alone their elderly mother? I went to the kitchen and found a clean dish towel, then returned to the dining room and began cleaning up the mess. As I wiped gravy from the wallpaper, I thought about Madison's simple, devastating assessment: "You're being a bully," out of the mouths of babes. When the worst of the mess was cleaned up, I sat down heavily in my chair at the head of the table. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, Gerald's PR. I'd enjoy the one piece of furniture his father had left him. What now? The question hung in the emptiness around me. What happens after your child throws food at you and you finally realize that things will never change? That the relationship you've been trying to salvage has been dead for years, kept alive only by your desperate hope and willingness to accept scraps of affection. I looked at my hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, but still strong, still capable. These hands had raised children, tended countless gardens, prepared thousands of meals, comforted a dying husband. They weren't the hands of someone ready to be discarded, shipped off to a facility where she wouldn't be a burden to her busy children. Slowly, deliberately, I began gathering the dishes from the table. I scraped the uneaten food into the trash, feeling a pang at the waste but refusing to let myself sink into self-pity. I washed each plate by hand, dried it carefully, and returned it to the cabinet. I wiped down the table, swept the floor, returned the dining room to its former neatness. By the time I finished, it was nearly 9 o'clock. The house felt different, somehow emptier, yes, but also lighter, as if a dense fog had lifted. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the living room, where I settled into my favorite armchair, the one with the worn upholstery that molded perfectly to my body. My phone sat on the side table. I picked it up and scrolled through my contacts until I found Michael's number. My son, so far away in Seattle, who called more often than Emily did despite the distance and time difference, who always sounded genuinely happy to hear my voice. I hesitated, then set the phone down without calling. This wasn't a conversation for tonight. I needed time to process, to think, to decide what happened next. Instead, I reached for the photo album I'd mentioned to Emily earlier, the one with her high school graduation pictures. I opened it to find my daughter at 17, radiant in her cap and gown, her whole life ahead of her. My beautiful, ambitious girl who had once looked at me with love and respect. When had it changed? When had I become someone to tolerate rather than cherish? Was it when she married Richard, who clearly viewed me as an inconvenience? Was it when her career took off, placing her in circles where a mother with a modest house and simple tastes became an embarrassment? Or had it been happening so gradually that I hadn't noticed until it was too late to reverse? I closed the album and placed it back on the shelf. The past couldn't be changed. Only the future was malleable, and even then, only my part in it. My tea had grown cold, but I drank it anyway, finding a certain symbolic resonance in the act. Cold tea, cold food, cold relationships. But I wasn't cold. Inside me, something was warming, awakening, stirring to life after a long dormancy. It had taken a plate of food thrown at me by my own daughter to finally understand. I deserved better, not just from Emily, but from myself. I deserved to value my own worth even when others didn't. I deserved to establish boundaries, to demand respect. To expect basic human decency. I had been allowing myself to be diminished, to be made small by my fear of loneliness. But wasn't this relationship with Emily where I walked on eggshells and accepted disrespect? Wasn't this its own kind of loneliness? Perhaps the most painful kind. I set down my empty teacup and stood up, feeling the familiar ache in my knees but ignoring it as I walked to the hallway. There, hanging by the front door, was my calendar, the kind with a different flower for each month. I flipped it open and looked at the empty squares stretching before me. So many blank days, unmarked by visits or plans or anything to look forward to, but they didn't have to stay blank. I went to my bedroom and retrieved my address book from the nightstand drawer. I sat at the small desk by the window and began to write a list. Call Marge tomorrow. Ask about that senior center pottery class she mentioned. Contact Michael. Schedule a proper visit. Maybe for Thanksgiving? Look into those computer classes at the library. Call Dr. Wilson about the arthritis medication. Ask Tom if he knows a handyman for the leaky faucet and torn screen. Simple tasks. Small steps, but they represented something profound. A decision to live fully with or without Emily's approval or presence, to stop waiting by the phone, stop organizing my life around the slim possibility of a visit, stop diminishing myself to avoid inconveniencing others. I added one more item to the list. Call Emily in 1 week, not sooner, no matter what. I needed time, and so did she. Time to think about what had happened, about what we both wanted from this relationship going forward. Time for her to understand that things had to change, that I wouldn't accept being treated this way anymore. As I prepared for bed that night, following my usual routine of washing my face, applying moisturizer, brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, yes, with new lines etched by the evening's stress. But there was something else there too, a certain resolution in my eyes, a firmness around my mouth that hadn't been there before. You deserve better, I told my reflection quietly. And from now on, you're going to expect it. I slept deeply that night, without the restless tossing and turning that had become my norm. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the bedroom curtains, casting dappled patterns on the quilt that had covered Gerald and me for 30 years of marriage. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a sense of purpose as I rose and dressed. Not the frantic purpose of preparing for a rare family visit, but something steadier, more sustainable. The day stretched before me, mine to fill as I chose. I started with breakfast, not just the hasty cup of coffee that had become my habit, but a proper meal, 2 eggs, toast, a small bowl of fruit. I ate at the kitchen table, taking my time, savoring each bite. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt oppressively so. It was a peaceful quiet, a restful quiet. After breakfast, I called Marge next door. I was wondering about that pottery class you mentioned, I said when she answered. Is it too late to sign up? Margaret, I'm so glad you called. No, it's not too late at all. The new session starts next Tuesday. Want me to pick you up on my way? That would be wonderful. Thank you. One call. One simple step toward a fuller life. And it had taken less than 5 minutes. Next, I called Michael in Seattle. It was early there, but he answered on the second ring, his voice warm and concerned. Mom, is everything okay? You never call this early. Everything's fine, Michael. Or it will be. I just wanted to talk to you about possibly coming for a visit. Perhaps for Thanksgiving? I'd love that, Mom. Let me check with Sarah, but I'm sure we can make it work. Is Emily coming too? I hesitated only briefly. I'm not sure yet. Emily and we need to work some things out. There was a pause on the other end. Did something happen? Yes, but it's a conversation for another time. For now, let's just talk about your visit. How are the children? How's your work going? We talked for nearly an hour, the most substantial conversation we'd had in months. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the tea I'd been sipping. The day continued in this vein, small actions, small decisions, each one a declaration of my continued presence in the world. My continued value as a person separate from my role as mother or grandmother. I called the library about computer classes. I called my doctor about better arthritis medication. I asked Tom about a handyman for the house repairs. Emily called for times. Each time I let it go to voicemail. She left increasingly apologetic messages. Mom, it's me. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about last night. Call me back when you can. Mom, please pick up. I feel terrible about what happened. I was stressed and tired, but that's no excuse. Please call me. Mom, I'm getting worried. Are you okay? Please just let me know you're all right. Mom, if you don't call me back by tonight, I'm coming over. I understand you're upset, but this silent treatment isn't fair. Wasn't fair? I almost laughed at that. What wasn't fair was being treated like an obligation, an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. What wasn't fair was having food thrown at me in my own home by my own child. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to explain or justify my silence. For once, Emily would have to sit with her discomfort, her uncertainty. For once, she would have to wait for me to be ready. The week passed in a blur of activity. I attended my first pottery class with Marge, making a lopsided bowl that nonetheless filled me with disproportionate pride. I signed up for computer classes at the library, determined to master email and video calling so I could communicate more easily with Michael and his family. I had the leaky faucet fixed and the torn screen replaced. Small repairs that made the house feel more cared for, more valued. Emily did come by. As threatened on the third day, I saw her car pull into the driveway through the living room window. I watched as she approached the front door, her expression a mixture of concern and irritation. I didn't answer her knock, though I was sitting just feet away. After several minutes, she left a note under the door and departed. The note read, Mom, I know you're upset and you have every right to be. What I did was inexcusable. Please let me know you're okay. We need to talk about this. Love, Emily. I placed the note on the mantel and continued with my day. This wasn't about punishing Emily. It was about honoring myself, my needs, my healing process. I would talk to her when I was ready, not when her guilt demanded it. On the seventh day, exactly 1 week after the dinner disaster, I called her. She answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Mom. Oh, thank God. I've been so worried. Hello, Emily. I'm calling to let you know I'm ready to talk now, if you still want to. Of course I want to. Can I come over? Right now. No, I said firmly, not yet. I'd prefer to talk on the phone first. There was a pause, then okay. Whatever you want, Mom. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. First, I want you to know that I'm okay. I've been busy this week with some new activities and taking care of things around the house. That's good. I'm glad. She sounded uncertain, unsure where this was going. Second, I want to be clear that what happened last week was unacceptable. Not just the food throwing, though that was certainly the worst of it, but the whole pattern of disrespect and condescension that has characterized our relationship for some time now. Mom, I know, and I'm so sorry. Please let me finish, Emily. I've thought a lot about this, and I need you to hear me out. She fell silent. I understand that you have a busy life. I understand that visiting me might not be your idea of an exciting way to spend an evening. But I am your mother. I raised you, loved you, supported you in every way I could. I deserve basic courtesy and respect, if nothing else. You deserve more than that, Emily said softly. You deserve love and appreciation. I know that. Then why don't you show it? The question came out more plaintively than I had intended. Why do you treat me like I'm a burden, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be cherished? There was a long silence on the other end. When Emily spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I don't know, Mom. I really don't. It's not how I feel about you, not really. It's just, life gets so overwhelming sometimes. Work demands so much, the kids need so much, Richard expects so much. And then there's you, and you need things too, and sometimes it just feels like one more obligation I can't possibly fulfill. I don't want to be an obligation, Emily. That's precisely the problem. If spending time with me feels like a chore, then maybe we should see each other less, not more. No. The word came out as a cry. No, that's not what I want at all. What do you want then? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you want me to quietly move into a facility where you can visit for an hour on Christmas and birthdays, ease your conscience with minimal effort, and not have to worry about me inconveniencing your life anymore. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to chat, not to check if I'd fallen or to pressure me about selling the house? When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my feelings? When was the last time you treated me like a whole person and not just aging mother, potential problem? Emily was crying openly now. I could hear it in her breathing, the small catches and hiccups. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say it was all okay, to fall back into old patterns. But I remained firm. I don't know what happened to us, Mom, she said finally. When did it get this bad? It's been happening gradually for years. But it doesn't have to continue this way. We have choices, both of us. What choices? What do you want me to do? I took another deep breath. I want you to decide if you actually want a relationship with me, a real, mutually respectful relationship, or if you're just going through the motions out of duty. Because I don't want your duty, Emily. I don't want grudging visits and barely concealed impatience. I'd rather be alone than be tolerated. Of course I want a relationship with you. You're my mother. I love you. Then show it. Not with grand gestures or sudden bursts of attention that fade when your guilt does, but with consistent respect and genuine interest. And if you can't do that, then be honest enough to admit it, so we can both adjust our expectations accordingly. Emily was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I can be the daughter you deserve, Mom. I want to be, but I don't know if I can. Her honesty, painful as it was, felt like a step forward. That's a start at least. Acknowledging where we are instead of pretending everything's fine. So what happens now? Now we try again, but differently. No more pretending. No more resentment simmering beneath the surface until it boils over. We talk openly about what we need from each other, what we can realistically give. Okay, she said quietly. When can I see you? I'd like to apologize in person. I considered this. Not this weekend. I've made plans with Marge from next door. We're going to an art exhibit at the community center. Oh. She sounded surprised, perhaps even a little hurt that I had plans that didn't revolve around her potential visit. Next weekend then. That would be fine. But just you, Emily, not Richard, not the children, just you and me, having an honest conversation, all right, just me. She paused, then added hesitantly, Mom, are we going to be okay? I thought about this carefully before answering. I don't know. Emily, that depends on both of us, but I hope so, I really do. After we hung up, I sat in my armchair for a long time, watching as the afternoon sunlight moved across the living room floor. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary. A first step toward something healthier, more honest. More sustainable. I had no illusions that one conversation would fix years of accumulated hurt and dysfunctional patterns. Emily might make an effort for a while, then slip back into old habits. I might find myself swallowing criticism again to avoid conflict. Change would come slowly, if at all. But something fundamental had shifted inside me, and that, at least, would not revert. I had drawn a line. I had declared my worth. I had refused to accept disrespect, even from my own child. In the days and weeks that followed, I continued to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for Emily's attention or approval. I threw myself into pottery classes. Discovering a latent talent for working with clay, I learned to use email and video chat, connecting with Michael and his family more frequently. I joined a book club at the library, making new friends who saw me as a peer, not just someone's elderly mother. Emily and I did meet the following weekend. The conversation was awkward. Painful at times, but ultimately productive. She apologized properly. Without excuses or deflections, I expressed my hurt without accusation or guilt-tripping. We both cried, we both listened. We both committed to trying again, differently. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There were still difficult moments, misunderstandings, old patterns that threatened to reassert themselves. But there was also a new honesty between us, a mutual acknowledgement that the relationship needed work from both sides. Madison and Zachary started visiting me on their own, sometimes Madison eagerly, Zachary with increasing interest as he discovered my collection of vintage board games and my stories about the olden days. Before cell phones and internet, these visits, free from the tension that had characterized family gatherings, became something I genuinely looked forward to. Michael and his family did come for Thanksgiving, filling the house with noise and laughter. Emily and her family joined us for dessert, only a shorter visit, but a more pleasant one for its brevity and clear boundaries. As for me, I continued to tend my garden, volunteer at the library, make lopsided pottery, and build a life rich with meaning and connection. I stayed in my home, the home where I'd raised my children, loved my husband, lived my life. I made repairs as I could afford them, accepted help when it was offered with love rather than condescension, and embraced the quiet moments as opportunities for reflection rather than reminders of loneliness. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, the silence still pressed into heavily. But I had made a choice that night, when Emily threw food at me, a choice to value myself enough to demand better treatment, to build a life worthy of the years I had left rather than simply enduring them. It wasn't the plate of cold food that had changed everything. It was my response to it, my refusal to accept disrespect any longer, my decision to walk away, not from Emily, ultimately, but from the version of myself that had allowed such treatment for far too long. In the end, that was the most important journey, not out of my house or away from my family, but toward a stronger, more authentic version of myself. A self that understood her own worth, that set boundaries, that expected respect as a baseline rather than a gift. A self that finally, after 72 years, learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to stay and endure, but to stand up and say, "No more, I deserve better than this." And then to go out and create that better for yourself, one small step at a time.